Well, I know we have a lot to cover here today, so I wanted to just kick things off and maybe just have my co-panelists here introduce themselves. David, do you want to start?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Bramble. I'm the managing partner and co-founder of MCB Real Estate. We're based here in, well, not here, but in Baltimore, and so here in the state of Maryland. We invest across the United States in retail, multifamily, industrial, and mixed-use properties.
Great.
Mark? I'm Mark Elrich, born in D.C., raised in Montgomery County, product of Einstein High School, the University of Maryland, and a little bit of Johns Hopkins, and been on the City Council at Tacoma Park for 19 years, spent 12 years on the County Council, and 6 years now as executive.
And real quick, I'm Ilana Fine. I am the board chair of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. We are the economic development arm of the county, partner very closely with the county executive and the county council. For all the businesses in the room, if you have not partnered with us, we have a booth outside, so we hope you do stop by, and that's the end of my plug. So I wanted to first just, for David, maybe give you a little more of a chance to introduce yourself to this crowd. I know you've done a lot of work in Baltimore and other locations around the area. So before we dive in, do you want to give a little more information to the audience just on MCB and some of your other projects before we dive into the one we're all here to talk about?
Sure, happy to do it. I actually see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, so I don't feel too out of place being Montgomery County. And we really do consider ourselves a national firm. We've done deals in 32 different states, but Maryland is our home, and we've made substantial investments across the state, including probably 100 or 200 million so far invested here in Montgomery County in multifamily and retail assets. I founded the company back in 2007 with my partner, Peter Pinkard, and every deal we've ever done has gone perfectly, and we're the greatest investors ever. Just kidding. But we're kind of a little bit of a unique firm because we both buy and invest in large-scale assets, and we also do very large-scale development. This year, we'll deliver about $500 million of new product across industrial, multifamily, retail, and office. So we're a little bit unique in that way, and we are very excited to be engaging in this monster project here in the county.
Great, thank you. So Viva White Oak has been called the most important real estate development in East County's history, and it's finally moving forward after years of stagnation. I'll start with our county executive. What makes this moment different from previous development attempts at this site?
There are a couple of things I think that are different about it. One is I think the capabilities of MCB are very different than what we've been working with, and that they actually have access to the capital. They understand the development process in Montgomery County, at least know how to work with it, and that they're really determined to deliver something. We had a master plan we went through. It got approved. It was supposed to be approved this now and it'll be built tomorrow, and all these things were going to happen, and nothing happened. No shovel ever went in the ground. And David brought a different approach to this. And I looked a little bit at his track record, and knew enough to know that he could play at this league and play at this level, and I had a level of confidence that he could work, and we had a really productive first meeting. And I realized this is something that's actually going to happen now. Through all the period of long stagnation, I had kept $40 million in my budget because we'd made a commitment that we'd put $40 million into this project for infrastructure when it was time to do that. And having a developer that finally has arrived who can do that, that money's sitting there waiting to go into this project. So that and the TIF I think are going to make a lot of difference. We'll probably talk more about the TIF later, but that's what makes this moment different. The person you're working with is very different.
David?
These projects are all really, really hard. I think anyone who's involved in projects like this knows that. It really is about collaboration and feeling comfortable that you're going to have the support you need. And so much thanks go to the county executive and, of course, Kristen Mink. This is in her district. And what you find is whenever you're approaching a project like this, there's the part where you're making the deal with the seller or the owner, and then there's the part where you're putting the money together, and then there's the part where you're meeting with the county or the governing body. And walking into that meeting and having a group of folks who really wanted to see this happen, who understood how important this was for East County, was really critical. Because these projects are really hard, they're super expensive just to get to the point where you actually can put a shovel in the ground, and it's a big challenge. And so we, as a firm, are familiar with hard projects, for better or for worse, and we are used to coming into situations, particularly in what I would call disinvested communities or areas where there hasn't been enough investment, and then challenging ourselves and all the other players who have to be involved to say, let's get something done. And so a lot of it is not just us doing a deal, it's us convincing everyone that it's time to collaborate because the deal is ready to be done. And I think this is an instance where we felt like those opportunities were available to us, and things were aligned. And look, there's still a lot of work to do. We're not there yet. But that's sort of what made the opportunity make sense for us to pursue.
I'm going to actually go off script a little bit because I realize that while a lot of the audience has probably been following this very closely, it's possible some may not have. David, can you maybe ask both of you, a little bit of your one kind of maybe one-line pitch on what Viva White Oak is, and then maybe just your vision, both of your vision for it, and then we can dive into some of the details.
You want to go?
Yeah, I can start with Mark. Yeah.
Sure. I think, in terms of the East County, which has long felt totally neglected, things were done on the west side of Montgomery County that were never done on the east side of the county, and it was treated in a very different way. This was an opportunity to kind of complete the projects that had been waiting on the east side of the county. When I got elected, the Burtonsville Shopping Center was abandoned, and people have been waiting years for that to get rebuilt. You're laughing, I know where you live. And and the project in White Oak Center, Town Center, that project was going nowhere, and the project at the New Hampshire Gateway was not going as fast as it was going to be. And so we managed to get our folks in the department, in my departments, to work with the developers to get those projects through so they would actually happen. And the one thing that was left out here was this project, which is probably the biggest. There is so much you can do with 280 acres. And we had a lot of ambitions because there are a lot of things that are needed on the east side of the county, not just another shopping center. It's gonna be the location, hopefully, of the East County campus of Montgomery College. We have not had a presence in this part of the county. So this brings a lot of things together that are important for that part of the county and important for us, and I think is a signal to everybody else that we really are serious about playing in this water. We're willing to get deals done, and I think this was a good example of that.
I always say, so we redeveloped the old A&P in White Oak into a ShopRite, and then redid it again into a Giant, for those of you who are familiar with the area. And I drove past this site 100 times. And I had no idea that sitting back there behind what looked like a big old gravel machine was 280 acres of land. And I call it the biggest site I've ever seen hiding in plain sight. It was just hiding. And it was hiding because there weren't people willing to make the necessary economic investments to bring it to life. So you have, and I wish we had some pictures because they're really cool, but it's 280 acres of prime land that is going to provide huge potential development opportunities. So we are talking about thousands of residential units. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of feet of retail. We are talking about life sciences. And we are talking about true master planned, mixed use, multi-phase development. You don't really get opportunities like this in a developed state like Maryland, so close to the nation's capital. You don't get that very often. So it really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a major investment. And so it's important to understand the scale of what we're talking about. This is a, $2.5 to $4 billion project that will happen over the next decade. It is a monster. And it's the kind of thing you can get excited about that will have a massive impact, not just on the site itself, but on the surrounding area, the tax base, and all the opportunities that come along with a project of this scale.
Thank you. So you had referred to the TIF, so I'll just jump into that because I know it's something a lot of people are talking about. So Mark, this is Montgomery County's first ever tax increment financing proposal. What gave you the confidence to pursue this tool at this moment, and how does it align with your long-term vision for equitable economic development in East County and beyond?
So for a long time, you hear about TIFs every once in a while, but Montgomery County never done one. I was interested, so early on, years before I met you, we actually sat down in my office and brought in people who are actually experts in TIFs and how to structure them. I've read the good stories and I've read the bad stories about TIFs. I've read TIFs that have really blossomed and led to really impressive developments, and I've read about TIFs where government got taken to the cleaners. And I did not want to get taken to the cleaners, but it was good to know that you didn't have to get taken to the cleaners. So it was important to us to do a little research without actually having a specific project in mind, just to put that in the toolbox. So when we first met, it came up pretty quickly. My thought was, special taxing district, which frankly the county had used to develop Germantown, was built on a special taxing district, if not a special taxing district, a TIF. And I was open to going either way, and we agreed that we would bring in, Unicap was our advisor. They're paid for by the county, we are their client. I have more confidence in a relationship when the person giving me advice is my client, or I'm their client. No, they're my client. No, I'm their client. I forget how this relationship works at this point. We're both embedded in this together. And we did our due diligence, and they did their due diligence, and we walked out of it feeling like this thing is going to make sense. If it gets developed the way he's talking about developing, it's going to generate a ton of revenue for the county. It's going to create jobs. It's going to change perceptions of the East County. There's so many positive things on it and so many reasons to be optimistic, because he's not kind of trying to cram this into a place surrounded by other stuff. This is like having a naked tableau in front of you and saying, what can I paint on this thing? And if I do this right, it's going to be beautiful. So between getting the confidence that the people who did the research for us had done it right, and the evidence they brought us back was solid, and his interest in doing it this way and knowing how to do this, I felt comfortable with it. It was the right thing to do.
And I'll just say, I think, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think sometimes TIF becomes a dirty word, mostly because people don't really understand. We really think about it as public infrastructure bonds, right? It's really just public infrastructure capital that's financed directly from the project that it's supporting, as opposed to across the board from the, let's say general obligation bonds issued by the county. And so it's really important to understand that it's all based on what we're going to build. It's not taking money away from some other project, some other competing project. It's really just about what we're building. And when you look at a site like this, you wonder, one of the reasons why it hasn't been developed, you got to spend 150 to 200 million just to get the roads and the sewers and all the infrastructure that's public infrastructure into the site, right? We all live on a road, well, maybe not all of us, but most of us live on a road in a house, right? Or an apartment building. Those roads were put in by a county or a city or wherever you live. Somebody's got to pay for that. And the beautiful thing about a TIF financing, if you can make the math work, which we can here, is that no one's paying for it except for the project itself. And I think that's a really important concept. And I want to be 100% clear with you. Without the TIF financing, this project doesn't happen, and no project of its scale could happen without this sort of partnership with the county, and it's a heavy lift to explain it to people. But I got to tell you, once they listen, they take the time to understand, the light bulb almost always comes on, and they say, "Wow, now I get it." We're able to get this project that we want without taking from another project or somehow obligating the county or the municipality in any kind of untoward way. So that's what makes it advantageous. And quite frankly, as you've noted, without it, there's no project.
And I would, as you know, I have seen some of the renderings. I would encourage folks to check out I think the Viva White Oak site and get a sense of what this could look like, because it's pretty exciting for the county. I'll follow up with you, David, though. You talked about kind of your experience driving past the site, and that it's also, you see all the possibilities, but also that it's a monster project. At least sounds like at least another decade, and I know how much time you've already spent on it. What convinced you it was worth the investment of time, money, maybe a little heartache along the way?
Heartache. This is easy. No. What convinced? I mean, look. First of all, you just start with Montgomery County. This is a place people want to be, right? You have retailers who want to be here. You have residents who want to be here. You have businesses who want to be here. But you have to build the product that they come to. So that's kind of where you start. Is there demand? Then you start to understand from that demand what kind of income can be generated from that demand. And, I hate to say it for all of us real estate guys. I mean, real estate's sort of the dumbest form of investment there is, right? We're basically investing in buildings and getting rent. That's kind of how it works. So what we have to understand is what that income is, and then what we can build it for, what it's going to cost, and can we deliver it, and can we finance it, and then will we have the support of the community who we need to use it, and the municipality that we need to approve it. So that's really what it is, bringing all those factors together. But it doesn't take a genius to understand that when you have this kind of density, you have the incomes, and then you have an area that hasn't received or had the opportunity for investment. If you are willing to do the work to put that investment in, you'll get a return on your dollars. You'll be able to raise the necessary capital to execute the project, and that's absolutely what we saw here. Remember, Cherry Hill Road, 29, FDA, it's all here. Now we have to invest in the site itself to see the fruits of our labor. So you can see it once you've laid it out. It's pretty easy to see what the opportunity is.
So just to give just the vision by some of the expected numbers, Viva White Oak is expected to deliver nearly 5,000 homes, 9,000 permanent jobs, and over $60 million in annual tax revenue. I'll start with Mark. Can you share how the community input shaped the county's approach to this deal and how it has influenced the development plans?
I think the community's biggest role was pre-deal, because this came up in the master plan for White Oak, and a very clear message. They didn't just want more housing development over, they wanted jobs on the east side of the county, because if you know anything about the east side of the county, everybody leaves the east side of the county to work. That's different than every other part of the county. And I think people felt that difference, and it really reflected as you were a bedroom community and you're going someplace else. And so people wanted something that would anchor it, something that would be stable, and so the job part of this was really important. They wanted a different mix of housing, not just more garden apartments. I mean, I'll say this bluntly, the county put a lot of lower income housing on the east side of the county because they would not put it anyplace else. A tradition which continues to some extent today. And that's a problem. And so they wound up without housing. I'm a kid who grew up in Einstein. I lived in the shopping mall in Wheaton. The East County doesn't even have a shopping mall. There is no proper place for a teenager to go and hang out and do the normal things that teenagers do, and that I spent my 3 years in high school doing. So, those are the kind of things that people know. I've got to go to Columbia to go shopping, or I've got to go to Wheaton, or I've got to go someplace off of Rockville Pike. So changing all that was really important. That's what they wanted. The original plans had some of that, but it was really aspirational, and like I said, none of it resulted in any shovel in the ground. he brought the capability to do that, and he brought a vision of what he was going to do that matched the aspirations of what people wanted. I think the slide getting the community acceptance was probably more like a celebration. When you walked in the room and you said, I'm ready to do this, my sense from people was they were amazed that somebody was actually ready to go forward, as was I.
And I'll kind of tweak the question too for you, David. I'm curious now, going forward, what has community input been, but also how will it continue to inform the efforts?
So we do, as a firm, it's kind of one of our things. We do a lot of community input. And community input is a challenging thing, or can be sometimes, because who's the community? What does that mean? And do you deal with every angry person who wants this or wants that? And how do you build consensus? Those are all tools I think we've really sharpened as a firm and gotten really good at sort of getting down to what do people really want to see and what's going to be effective. And you have to balance sort of the crazy things you hear, like, because if you just did straight community input, somebody made a joke once in our firm, you'd end up with bull riding in a senior center with a school on top. And that's not really economically viable. So it's really a matter of weaving together lots of things. And I see a bunch of our colleagues are here, and Carlos and Dory and Teresa and Daniel. And we met with a lot of people to get input. And it's actually been really good. And I think it's important. Now, the input sort of ends up with two things. One part of the community engagement is getting ideas, and you actually do get a sense of what people need. Like, you understand, like, hey, these are the things that are missing in the community that you just can't tell from, the surveys that we do and Google Maps and all that kind of stuff, right? But then on top of that, you also get buy-in, which is important, because we say this at MCB all the time. We can build anything, but if people don't use it, the project will fail. So part of our goal with community engagement is to really get people thinking about, wait a minute, this space is being built, and the space is being built for me to use and enjoy and be part of. And that's why we think, as a result, we came up with, we think things that are really important, like a vibrant central gathering place. I think we've heard that 1.6 trillion times. And then the right mix of programmed open spaces, and having local retail with national retail. Those are all the things that you sort of winnow down to as you get through the process. So we think the process was really good, and it will continue. We still go to meetings, and if folks want to reach out to us, they can reach out to us anytime. I think all that information, how to contact us, is on the website.
Thank you. And so I would say, what does this partnership between the county and MCB represent in terms of a new model for development? And then what do you both see as lessons here for other parts of the county or region?
So I'll say that every part of the county is not the same. Not every place is a 280-acre sand and gravel pit with no infrastructure that requires somebody to put an awful lot of money into the ground, not knowing what there's any return going to be, just put it in the ground and see what happens. That's hard to do, and it's hard for the county to do. Most of the sites, developable sites in the county, are not on the order of that. And we'll look at TIFs. We've already been approached by people about other TIFs, and we'll look at them to see whether they make sense. Is this project large enough? Or is this just a road the developer just should have built because that's what you do when you're building a development? This is a little bit more than just asking someone to build a road. This was asking everybody to put in the entire underlying infrastructure, and that made it very unique. So I think it shows that we're serious about opening up our minds to how we finance things differently, and we'll take other proposals and put them through an evaluation. If they make sense, then we'll go ahead and do it. And if there are other ways of doing this, special taxing districts come to mind, we can do that too. There are multiple ways to get at the same thing, and we just have to be flexible. The main thing is to, at the end of the day, get to something where we leave the table and the other party leaves the table saying we're going to be able to go ahead with this deal. And I think if everybody comes to this in a good faith way, we can figure out a way to do that. There's no reason for us not to do that.
Yeah, and I'll say, obviously, as I've said multiple times, this project needed a TIF. Like, there's no way to do something like this on this scale without either just the county just fronting the money for the bonds or doing something like this to get the infrastructure in. However, to me, that's not the most important takeaway. To me, because every project, as the county executive said, doesn't need a TIF. The most important takeaway, I think, is the cooperation and collaboration and really honest conversation that you have to have to do large-scale development. That means you have to walk in with a real plan, a plan that's at least somewhat doable. I know there's always things to be tweaked and changed. You have to have a real conversation with the powers that be, and then you have to get a real answer. And the answer doesn't have to be yes. The answer can be no, but you need an answer. Because so often when you meet with government officials, you get, excuse my French, you don't get a direct answer. And as investors, we can't function in that sort of environment where you're not getting direct answers, you don't know what's going to happen, you won't make investments. And I think one of the things that we've appreciated so much is that we got a direct answer. Yes, if you do this, 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 and this, we will consider this, 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 and this. And then when we did those things, then we got to the next level and went through. And I'm not saying it's a piece of cake, like you walk in and you walk in one day with a smile and you walk out with a TIF. It doesn't work like that. But you have to have a level of cooperation. And I think what we've seen is a county that's open for business and that is willing to consider the right tool for the right problem. And that's impressive. And we do business in lots of jurisdictions, and we certainly do not see that. Quite frankly, we don't even see that often. So it's refreshing, and we certainly wouldn't have invested the many millions we've invested so far if that weren't the case.
Well, that's good to hear, because I know we do get criticized as a county a lot, so for not being as cooperative. So it's great to hear you say that, and hopefully everyone in the room will go tell all their friends how cooperative we have been. I just want to kind of follow up on that because I know we're almost out of time. I have one more question, and for David, and then any last comments for our county executive. This is more of a macro question because we are here talking about the future of a county. This has been a challenging year for the county and the area, and much uncertainty persists. Based on your observations and working in other locations as well, what recommendations do you have for our county as we look to leverage our assets to make our county as competitive as possible given the landscape we're in now?
It's for me.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is everywhere and persistent from a developer's perspective. It's red tape. It's red tape and useless regulations that have been around forever, and lack of responsiveness. The reality is that what I think what's holding us back is we have created so much process around development and redevelopment and investment that it just makes it really difficult to get things done. So I think that my hope for the county, for Montgomery County, and for Maryland and the country, is that we start to realize that sometimes progress is more important than process. And sometimes we have to commit, if we really want to make people's lives better and attract investment, we've got to commit to progress. And that's not easy because sometimes you got to, look at things a different way, try a little harder, stay a little bit later to get something done. But now more than ever, it's on us. There is no one helping us to get stuff done. No one really cares what happens in Maryland except us. And I think if we want progress in this county, want progress in this state, we've got to demand it. We've got to push for it. And when you run into people who are roadblocks, you say lead, follow, or get out of the way. And I think that's my message to us all as citizens and to the government as well.
Mark, any closing remarks?
So I'm really happy to be here sitting and having this conversation because I think it's a good conversation. It's an important one. But I'll say that, there are a lot of things that make our future at least momentarily unstable and uncertain. I don't know if you're going to have a workforce to do construction after $40 billion goes to ICE to hire the ICE Army to deport people, because that's what happens in October. And I don't know what you do if there are not enough construction workers to go forward. I do not believe that will be a permanent state of affairs. I think that'll rapidly grind things to a halt in a way that even the business sector will be uncomfortable with where this country's going. I'm hoping that at some point enough people wake up and say this isn't sustainable, because you cannot function without a workforce. That's just flat out true. Those people who are going to sit in your retail shops, whether they're the clerks, whether it's the people in the restaurants and doing all the work there, if you can't get workers to do that, you can have the greatest plans in the world that it's not going to pan out on paper. So I think we're going to go through some interesting times for a short period of time, and I'm hoping that we recover from this and return to normal. But normal does have to be different. When I got elected, one of the first things we did was to do a listening tour with my friend Sidney Katz. We made a deal during my last term on the council. He supported the minimum wage. He was my fifth vote. And I agreed that we would do a listening tour of businesses and have them tell us why we sucked. We did that. And I had all of my staff in the room taking notes, and things like our contracting process. We could give you a contract and people would say, I'm not bidding on a $100,000 contract where I got to hire a $20,000 lawyer to read 150 pages of, as you said, in order to get to the essence of what it is you want us to do. And so Ash Shetty, who is my procurement person, cut that contract down to 17 pages of English. And that was stunning. We've worked with the permitting department. Every time somebody comes to me with something, I've got to figure out, is it my people, is it my system, or is it the state? And if you're going to come to me about the excessive size of the thing you have to put in the kitchen to catch the grease trap, which means you've got to dig up the floor in an existing facility and spend a lot of money doing your piping, that's the state. And so I've raised this issue with the state. Are you requiring more than you should? Because everybody tells me, we've been living with these smaller grease traps for years. We just clean them out. I don't need to have a gigantic grease trap. So we'll try to continue to figure out where the problem lies on our end and deal with it. And we need to do two other things, I think, seriously. This county, we diverged from Virginia around 2012, when Virginia went off and made this major change in taxation on commercial property, which led to Tyson's Corner exploding. It was the massive raising of infrastructure taxes. And I'll call them infrastructure taxes because that's the only thing that taxes could be used for that made it possible to build out Northern Virginia the way it's been built out. Today, there's one group that raises money for all the Northern Virginia counties. It's $500 million a year goes in. In Fairfax County, people are going to Tyson's Corner so they can avoid Montgomery County's $1.02 tax rate and pay $1.54 in Tyson's Corner. They're going there because of infrastructure. And we have failed and refused to build infrastructure. And as long as we refuse to build transportation, somebody else is going to eat our lunch, as they've been doing for the last decade. And we've got to get over the aversion to doing the right thing. And we've got to change the way park and planning handles applications. And the length of time it gets to get in front of park and planning, and the length of time it takes to go through that process, the length of time that you're waiting for an approval from an agency that should have nothing to say about whether a TIF is approved, that's not a park and planning issue. That should be a government and developer issue. We've got plenty of backup in our system to make sure we do the right thing. We don't need another layer of nothingness that does nothing more than consume time and waste energy and frustrates people who want certainty. So there are a couple of things we need to reform, but I think we've got, as you said, everything we need. We are the right place to be. We've got the assets, we've got the ability. That's not going to change. So we'll just get better. That's what we can do.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. I think we are all rooting for the success of this project and hope to support as much as we can. So thank you, David, for being here. Thank you, County Executive.